Here's about the very, very sad news with Omni Myers.
Who?
Omni Myers.
Yeah, let me start over here. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Brachas, Perek Zayin, Halacha Aleph. In the Ois V'Hader's edition, we're going to be learning Daf Ayin Beis. We left off on Daf Ayin Aleph, Amid Beis. Let's start again from 3 lines before the bottom of the Amid. So the Gemara left off by comparing based on the rule that we learned, that when you have 3 people that sat together, or more than 3 people, upon which they're now mechuyev, when they bench, they sat down together to eat a meal, now they're chayiv to do zimun. If one of the group wrongfully left the group, but there were 2 people like him, because there were other groups from which other individuals left, and now these 3 joined together, as these statements were further clarified by Rabbi Chisda, since there was a chalois chiyuv on each one, now that they joined together, even though they did not eat together, they're now mechuyev to do zimun. And based on that, and connected to that, compared to Gemara, when we learn that when it comes to toiveling, the hisab, the ezoiv inside the mechatos, and the rule is that we learn from agudas ezoiv that you have to have at least 3 stalks dipped into the mechatos. If you had 3 stalks that were dipped in, and subsequently, prior to sprinkling, one of the 3 got disconnected, that one may not be used, even though it has on its tip some of the mechatos. Similarly, if there were 3 groups of 3 hisabs, and from each one got disconnected, now that you join those 3 individuals together, so 3 stalks together, now you could use it to sprinkle the mechatos. Verstehst? Similar to the din of the 3 individuals that are mechuyev to make a zimun. And we left off by the Gemara making this statement, and we all know that this statement isn't only connected to our sugya, but it's a much broader statement, and it's like a wonderment. Is it shayach? Are we comparing 2 unrelated subjects one to the other? That's where we left off. And the Gemara says, yeah, we find this elsewhere, and that's where we're going to continue. The elsewhere is going to be a din in Sukkah, and there's a question regarding a certain din in Sukkah and Schach, and we're going to learn the solution. We're going to resolve the halachic inquiry from learning a din from Hilchos Mikvos. And the truth is that throughout Torah we find this type of system. Not that all of the halachas travel on the same track. They don't. But many times they do. And therefore we are able to draw similarities from one halacha to the other. Just want to say that the Zajac of a Goin said, and that was his derech halimud, when he was trying to find underlying ideas that connect 2 apparently different topics, one from the other, that he managed to understand all of the different arguments in Torah Sheba'al Peh, that they are all really coming from 10 points. You know what kind of grind that is? And from those 10 nekudas comes everything. And he says, had he been smarter, he would have brought the 10 down to the 1. And what is that 1? That Hashem Echad. That somehow this concept of Hashem Echad is the underlying Yisoid, even for all of the logic behind all of the Torah. Now we know these words to be true, but imagine getting close to that point, which is where he got, and that's really what we're going to begin the topic with today. We're going to have a din regarding the bracha, the shoyna, as we'll explain, and the Gemara is going to have a question what that means. Really, there's going to be a question whether zimun is considered to be a bracha by itself, or whether the zimun, which is nevarech shachal mishaloi, is part of the first bracha. And as we'll see, Lamay Nafkamina, when we unpackage the Gemara. And the final topic that we will at least begin today is the Gemara making a correlation, again, a connection, pointing out that we find only in 2 areas that something demands a bracha pre and the bracha post. And what are they, guys? Where do you have to make a bracha both prior and post? By eating, right? Pre and post. And where else? By Torah. Now, just to define Torah, for the mitzvah of learning Torah, we wake up in the morning and we make the birchas HaTorah. We really make 3 brachas, but we don't make a bracha post. But when you're called to read the Torah by Kriyas HaTorah, there's a bracha prior and there's a bracha afterwards. And we're going to begin that topic, like what's the sources of that? And it's amazing how, according to some opinions, one is learned from the other, because really in the Torah, there is an allusion to making a bracha pre-learning Torah, as we'll see. In the Torah, we find when it comes to eating, befedish, that you have to make a bracha after eating. But we'll see whether there's a Gzeira Shava, whether there's a Kal V'chomer, and bottom line will be is that only by these 2 do we make a bracha both prior and post. Okay, so 3 lines before the bottom of the by the dot. So now that we related, like we explained, these 2 halachas of zimun and hazoas mechatos, so the Gemara is going to like almost ask on itself that in Teimat, if you're going to wonder, or if you're going to make a statement, which will be a challenge to this comparison, that Eila made them ezoiv mibracha. How can you compare a din in how many ezoids do you need by the hazoya, and how does it work? And if you had 3 and now you only have 1, but that 1 got connected to another 1 from another 3 v'chule, and you're comparing that it will ultimately function. Where do you find such a thing? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you, because va'anan chazeinon rabbanan kaimen besukam, that we find elsewhere that when the Chachamim were having a discussion, b'negeya a specific halacha concerning the sukkah, and they were unable to resolve it from the laws of sukkah. Where did they go? The alfinan or the alfin, they learned and they got their resolution from another halacha, from tit hanorik, from pouring mud, which is, we'll explain all this in a moment, which is a halacha from Hilchos Mikvahs. Sukkah from mikvah, yeah. If you can learn sukkah from mikvah, then you can compare hazoya to bracha to zimun. Top of daf ayin beis. Now, what are we talking about? Let's first begin the halach and sukkah. Kai de taninan taman, like that which we learned over there. There is Bavli Sukkah Daf Yud Zayin. Rule number 1: Hirchik esasichuch min adafanes shloisha tfachim sulam. That not only if you have a gap of empty space in the schach, in middle of the sukkah, 3 tfachim by 3 tfachim, will that invalidate the sukkah? That we know. Adds the Mishnah that even if this open gap is by the wall, is by the edge, and by the way, if you remember, there's so many halacha l'moshe misinais in El Chasukkah, there's a concept called doifen akuma. There are certain leniencies that we find dafka by the edge, by the parameter of the sukkah, that we don't find in the middle. Nevertheless, this rule that if there's only 3 tfachim or more of an empty air, no schach, it invalidates the whole sukkah. Not only is that if it's in the middle, even if it's by the edge. In other words, if that gap is adjacent any one of the walls. End of Mishnah. Now, when we speak about 3 tfachim, what do we learn from that? What does that imply? Hapachas mikan. But if there's an opening, but the opening is less than 3 tfachim, then it's kosher. And if you guys remember, that's one of the many applications of the law of, you remember the word, lavud. Right? That we extend, that if there's 2 things that are within 3 tfachim, one from the other, they are considered to be connected. Okay, so now we're good. Now came the question. Now that we have a din of lavud, we want to know, how far do we take it? Mahu lishan tachto. Are you allowed now to sleep under this gap of less than 3 tfachim? In other words, Shmuley, do we say that lavud means that it's as if there's chach there? And by the way, the same question can be for eating, right? Can you eat under that gap? The reason, which is what they're asking, the reason why the Chachamim asked it concerning sleeping is because we know that the smallest size of a sukkah, we're speaking about the length and the width, is 7 by 7 tfach. So really what we're saying is that if I have a sukkah of only 7 by 7 tfach, it's very little, and 2.9 tfachim don't even have schach, There's only schach 4 point a little. The sukkah is kosher. Now, when it comes to eating, and if I'm going to wonder, can I eat under the gap? You know what someone can tell me? Why don't you just move over and eat under the 4 tvachim? Well, it's by eating, when you have a minimum size sukkah, it's shaykh to eat under the schach. When you're sleeping in a 7 tefach sukkah, first of all, I challenge you to go lay down on 7 tefach. You got to curl up in a fetal position, but you're using up the whole 7 tefach. In other words, this is a question like, can you sleep underneath it? And if you can't sleep underneath it, then you can't sleep in that sukkah at all. But at a chanami, the question is by eating. Can you eat underneath it? They were wondering. So comes along Rabbi Yitzchak bar Eliyashiv, hasiv. I know the words hasiv. Massive, right, is used more in the Bible like a question. It was a question, but it was a Jewish answer. But many times a Jewish answer is you answer a question with a question. So Rabbi Yitzchak ben Eliyashiv like countered, you have a kasha, what's even your kasha? Of course we know the answer. From where do we know the answer? There was a din of pourable mud. Pourable mud means that it's so liquidy. How do you define so liquidy? That if you have mud in one keli, and you want to move it from utensil 1 to utensil 2, you are able to remove the mud, not by scooping it up. You can simply pour it the way you pour liquid. Pourable mud. The din is that mashlim b'mikvah, that if you are trying to put together 40 sa'ah of mayim that's not she'uvim, right? Waters that you're trying to make a mikvah. What happens if you had a certain amount of mayim, but you only hit the minimum 40 sah because some of this mud also fell into the mikvah? In other words, is it mud or is it water? So the halacha is that since it's pourable, halachically it retains its status of water. Of course, if the water was gathered in a keli, like mayim, that becomes gathered, it invalidates the mikvah. We're speaking about that did not happen. The question is simply, is it water or not? On one hand, we learned it's mashlim the mikvah. On the other hand, we learn, guys, pourable mud without effort will remain self-contained. Think about it. You have a big body of water, and you need a minimum amount, and there was less than the minimum amount. But somehow there was a flood, and there was mud, flowing, and some of that mud entered the mikvah. Now you have 40 sub. No one is going to mix it around. In that corner, you'll have the mud. The question is, can you go into the mikveh, into that mud? So they paskin, you cannot. The ein mad bilim. So what is the Rabbi Yitzchak ben Eliyashiv showing from you? That just because we are saying that mitzad the din of mayim, of memsa, we consider tit hanorik as mayim, which we do, it doesn't mean that it's considered mayim mamish for you to be allowed to toivel in it. And therefore, his comparison is that even though we have a din of lavud, yes, since the gap of empty space is less than 3 tvachim, we consider it to be filled in. B'negeya, you don't have an opening that's going to invalidate the mikvah. But for you to sleep underneath it, and similarly for you to eat underneath it, zoisloi, the titanarig is good enough to be mashlim, but you can't toivel in it. Afachi. Yes, mashlim b'sukkah. The din of lavud is that we view it as if it's filled in, but it's not mamish chach, and therefore ve'en yeshenim tachto. Now look at this jump. So in other words, what the Gemara is saying, that just like you can learn from tit hanarig mikvah to a din in lavud and sukkah, what's the connection? You see, there is a logical underlying connection, but it's 2 different cases. Mamish, this type of comparison, perhaps the comparison here is even more similar, perhaps, is, we could learn a din of the Ezoiv from the din of Bracha, from the din of Zimun. Givaldi. Okay, so that closes that. And now we're going to open up today's second topic. Says the Gemara. Shloisha, sha'achlu ka'achas. 3 people are eating together. Ubikesh echad mehem leilachloi, and one person wishes to leave. Now, guys, it's important to know that the Gemara is referring to 2 different cases. I'm going to speak both of them out, but instead of learning the whole Gemara by going back and forth 2 cases, we're going to follow the first of the 2 that I'm explaining. Case number 1 will be that when, guys, remember, when three people eat together, how did this pedic begin? Shloisha sha'achlu ka'achas. What's the din? Chayiv the chayiv to make a zimun. And that's what happened. They ate together. They're making a zimun. But one person has an emergency and he has to leave. He's not running away. He wants to leave as soon as possible. Now, there are many details. If he's going to have to leave as soon as possible, it doesn't mean that he was yoytze benching. If he's not there for the whole benching, this guy is going to return. We're not getting into the halachis. How does it work? How does it not work? But by the way, that's the way it works. If I eat mezoinus or hamoitzi in one location and I left, I cannot bench over there. I have to return. He's going to return. The question is, there's going to be a zimun. He's itching. He needs to leave. How long throughout the zimun, throughout the benching, must he stay? And when can you say, okay, we did the zimun, we did at least enough of the benching, and now I can go and I'm going to come back later. Yachap, that's the question. Question is, at what point can he say, okay, I was yoytze the zimun, I'm going to return to bench, but now I can leave. There's a whole other way of learning over here, and that whole other way is three people are eating together, shmuli. Now they have to make a zimun. This happens. The second what I'm saying is very more common. One guy wants to bench. First of all, what's the law? Now, when he benches, the other people have to respond. The other people say, we don't want to respond. We're busy eating. I'm in my state. You should know the halacha is that the minority has to follow the majority. That means he cannot tell them, since I have to leave, now there's only three. He can't leave. And I need to bench, stop. He cannot impose it on them. But if they want to go lifnim yishuras hadin, or let me say English, if they want to be normal, this guy's in a rush, it happens the whole time. Right? The guy that's in a rush makes zimun. So now the question is, when he makes zimun, how long must they wait before they go back to eating? No, it's how much of benching must the mezamen do? The minimum for you to say, okay, now we did the zimun. Now we know this halacha, by the way, halacha lemaisa. What do we do, Shmuel? Do you remember? Until azana sakoil. This is very common. In other words, the guy, if there's three people or four people, whatever, then one guy wants to bench. I have to rush. Can I do a zimun? He has to ask them, and they'll say, yeah, if they're normal, and he'll make the Rabbi say, and he'll go until hazana sakoil, and only then will the people go back to eating. This is really the stuff. Now, again, instead of going back and forth, let me just go further with the first example we gave. First example we gave is one guy needs to leave. They're beginning the zimun. The guy that's leaving is not doing the zimun. He's not leading the benching, right? Question is, at what point he's in a rush? He mamash has to leave. Going to say, okay, we were yoytze at the zimun. I'm going to go. I'm going to come back later to bench. It's the same concept. So here we have like this. It's two steps. Step number one is we know the answer. We know the words of the answer. There's going to be a machlokes amoraim to the understanding of those words. Where did those words come from? It's also amazing. Not from an amoira. It came from the household members, the Beis Rav. You can say it's his household. You can say it's his yeshiva. But the people that were around the Rav, they say, today it's not, but obviously that's so Shitas Rav. That the minimum amount to stay together is only up until the end of the first bracha. Once the first bracha was done, in these cases, you're good to go. By the way, like we mentioned, you're good to go. Now the question is, what's the meaning of bracha rishono? Let me say by heart the two options. Option number one is, which is what we do, that the zimun is not called a bracha by itself. You don't say Baruch Atah Hashem. You say Rabbi Say Nidish Mibalam Benshin. Even when there's a minyan, you say Elokeinu. But you're not making a bracha b'shemu malchus. Let's word it that way. Bracha rishono would mean the Rabbi Say, the inviting, and the first bracha until Azana Sakoil, which is, by the way, the way we pass it. But there's another way of understanding that bracha rishono might mean only the zimun. The minimum amount where the three people have to still be there together is when you do it. Once you finish nevarach shachalnu mishaloi uvetulei chayinu, right? The guy who's leading it responds. Once that's said, the guy can go. So that's the vayter. So the Gemara says now, okay, we know those words from the Beis Rebbe. Question is, we got to get moving. Ezi bracha rishono. So again, the Beis Rav, the same source who said the psak of Yivarech bracha rishono v'yelach loy, they're saying what it means, but not everyone listened to them. that it only goes to the Birchas Hazimun, not to the first bracha Azonas HaKoil. Birchas Hazimun is called a bracha. However, Rab Ze'era, in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, says, no, the bracha Rishona is Hu Azonas HaKoil. And with Rabbi Ze'era, another Ramay, Rab Chelbai Bar Chanan, in the name of Rav, maybe that's why they have more koyach. You're coming to Veis Rav, I heard it from Rav, Azonas HaKoil. So that's the two opinions. So the Gemara says, now that we have the from the Veis Rav, that bracha Rishoina is only referring to the zimun itself. How can that be? We learned the following in the Brais. What happens if Shnayim Shloisha Chayovin Bibirchas Hazimun? Case of the Brais is, as the Charedim quotes from the Riv, that you have three people eating together. And guys, don't forget that in those days, the norm was that one person, the one who made the zimun, would bench out loud for everyone. Problem that they had is that for whatever reason they were amaratzim. But look how the irony. Everyone knew a part of the benching. No one knew the whole benching. So one person, let's say, knew the first bracha, or the first bracha and the second. The other person knew the third. So as the Charedim quotes from the Rif, that if there's one person that knows the first half and another person knows the other half, they can't bench. You can't make a collective bench. It doesn't work. You can't make a zimun. But as long as every person knows at least one bracha, so the shnayim would mean, if two people are leading the benching, you know what that means? That one of them knows two brachas and one knows one bracha. Shloisha would mean that each one only knows one bracha. So it doesn't matter. Not only shnayim, even if shloisha, being that it does work that way, I don't need for the one guy to say the whole benching, and therefore chayavim bebirchas hazim. Now, when the Brais is trying to give you the greatest kiddush, right? So again, knowing half of a bracha is not enough. But now the kasha is, if the zimun itself is qualified as a bracha, why didn't the Brais say that even if you need to have four people, oichet good? What would be the four people? The guy that's going to say, only one guy knows the words, Navara Shechal Mishaloi. That's the zimun. And then bracha Rishoina, which is already two. The Al Haaretz Valamasa number 3. And the Yerushalmi is number 4. In other words, that's the question that he's asking. How can you say that bracha Rishoina could refer to only the zimun itself? Ha arba'a loi. And in other words, he's speaking it out that in Tamar birchas zimun is the Rishoina. So why didn't that Braisa say arba? Is araya that the zimun is part of the first bracha? Now this seems to be a checkmate. The answer is not an answer of seichel. They heard this kasha, and then someone came into the base medrash and he says, "Hold on, I found another brisa." They knew of another brisa, and in that brisa we have the same din, but over there the word is not shnayim shloisha chayavim. There it says even arba, mamash punkt fakert. So now let's use the arba guys and let's challenge the second opinion. In other words, we're going to use this Bryce and to kasha the other side. Now, if zimun, right? If bracha Rishoina means this zimun and azonas hakoil, so what's the max you can have? Only 3. How is it shaykh to have 4? In other words, is it so? Now this Bryce should be a question against. Now you can say machlokes tanoim, but we're going to try to make everyone go according to this Bryce. Now, the simplest solution would be, and David, you brought that up. What are you talking about 3? There's 4 brachas and brachas hamazon. So the Gemara says that in Tamid, if you're going to try to respond, that he stands his ground, even according to this brayse. The zimun and the first bracha is only 1. Why did the brayse say 4? Because the case is that in Tamid zo'atoiva meitev leis at yachil. No, you can't give that answer. Why? Because the 4th is shaynahi. The 4th is different. Why is the 4th different? Turning to that, I'm based on base. We keep on speaking this out. To Amar Rab Chuna, that the 4th bracha was written 1,000 years later. It was not written by the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah. By the way, none of them were right. They were written like Moshe, Yeshua, and Moshe, and David and Shlomo. It was written, Mishenitnu haruge beite lekvura. Then nikba hatoiv u'meitiv, and why did they have this double expression hatoiv, that they did not decompose? Whether it was 7 months or 7 years, amachleikas, different versions, but even if it's 7 months, for bodies not to decompose, it's a mamash hanes. And v'hameitiv, the faction itnu lekvura. And dafka in that order, because the non-decomposing, the miracle of not decomposing started immediately. Shenitan lekvura was something that came about later. Bottom line is that since the 3 are doiraisa, the 4th is midrabanan, we're not going to put them together. Now, before we go on, when we opened up this Pedic, we spoke out that there's a machlekes amongst the poskim whether zimun is a doiraisa or a derabanan. What does this Gemara imply, Chavra? It implies that zimun is doiraisa, because in other words, we were saying before that it would work for what would be the 4 according to the Veis Rav, zimun and the 3. But we're taking it as a given that we don't put the Rabbanan and the Eraisas together, and Chanami, that's the way we're going to learn the Gemara over here. And let's go back. Amar Rab Chuna, says Rab Chuna, that no, I can still explain this Braisa that says that even 4 people can lead the benching. And yes, the Zimun and Hazan is 1. And therefore the 4th has to be a Toivo Meitiv. There is one opinion that says, which is the Ashita of Rabbi Yishmael, that HaToiva Meitiv is also Midoiraisa. Wow. Tiftik Rabbi Yishmael Amar, HaToiva Meitiv Dvar Toira. And guys, just to speak out Balpet, the pasuk in Akev is V'achalta, V'savata, Uveirachta, Es Hashem Elokecha, Al Ha'aretz HaToiva Asher Nasan Loch. So V'achalta, so he teaches like this. This is Rabbi Yishmael. V'achalta, V'savata, Uveirachta. It's mamish amazing. What does Uveirachta mean? Not benching. Virachta is zimun. Wow. You can even say that there's no greater bracha than shalom. What is zimun? Zimun is we are inviting each other to be together. And the greatest togetherness is that if we are uniting around the mitzvah. How do you gather people together? Because you say everybody's a different body. When you get together, people are united around the cause. What's the cause? A godly cause. It's a beautiful concept that zimun is the biggest bracha. That's uvirach. Es Hashem Elokecha, that goes to Azanas HaKoil. Al Ha'aretz, Zubir Chas Ha'aretz. HaToiva, this is L'Kula Alma, goes to be in Yerushalmi. Why are we calling Yerushalmi Toiva? Because we have another pasuk that Moshe Rabbeinu says, Ha'arazeh HaToiv, V'halvanai. So the word HaToiv goes to Har Hazeh. Har Hazeh refers to Temple Mount, meaning refers to the Beis HaMikdash. Asher Nasan Loch, that goes to HaToiv U'meitiv, which is quite amazing. Okay. In other words, we concluded this sugya by pointing out that the braisa that says 2 or 3 and not 4, that braisa clearly holds that zimun and the first bracha are 1. If not, you would have 4. The braisa that says 4 can go according to both opinions. It can go 4 can mean that you have 4 people together. One guy knows how to do the zimun only, and everyone knows how to make an entire bracha bench. That's the 4. Zimun, Hazan, Ha'aretz, being Yerushalmi. Or if we're going to put together the zimun and the first bracha, the 4 can go to Atoiv Meitiv. Hastakasha Atoiv Meitiv should not be put together because it's the Rabbanan. Then you have to learn that this will follow the shita that Atoiv Meitiv is Dorais. Atkan Desugi. Like we said, we paskin that the zimun goes together with the first bracha. And in both of these scenarios, that's what we need to do. Okay. No, it does not. No, it does not. And there's a lot on this topic. There's a lot on this topic. No, I just pointed out, it's not me, that many of the Achronim, when they learned the sugya, they prove from what we just learned the fact that in the Havamina, before Rabbi Shmuel, we excluded the Toiv Meitiv. But we allow to include as 4, 1 by Zimun. That's a right that the pashtus from our sugya is that Zimun is a bin doiraisa, which is mamash amazing. And again, even more than that, when you learn this braisa, you think of verachta means to bless God for the food. Verachta means inviting people to do a mitzvah together. The whole idea of the Rebbe's mitzvah, in other words, you're not doing the mitzvah, you're inviting another Jew to do a mitzvah. That's the bracha. That there's even more than thanking God is joining to thank God. before you thank God. The joining to thank God, it's amazing, this concept. Whether we pass on that way, so there's a prima godim that says words that Reif HaPoiskim says with Rabbanan. Many people challenge the words of the prima godim, simply not knowing where did he get that from. This is a big topic. Okay, let's go back. The third topic of today, and this is really fascinating, and just al pi Chasidus, it mamish works. Even it's so easy to understand these ideas. Learning Torah, there's a pasuk that Chasidus quotes a lot. Torah is water, and Torah is yayin, Torah is shemen. Let's go to Torah's lechem, and I don't mean lechem, the food and not drink. The concept, l'chu lachmu b'lachmi. That's the pasuk we learn in many maimonim. That begashmius. You take something in, food, and it gives you nourishment. It mamash gives you nourishment. And begashmius, some of the food is not healthy. You expel it, but you know what? We had the mun. We have food that when it's pure, you absorb it all. That's what Torah is. The Torah gets absorbed in your mind. So you're eating. You know, God, Hashem is giving Himself in a way, and then you have the whole Tanya, the whole work of the Alter Rebbe, that the yichud nifla she'en yichud kamayu, because when you understand something, that thing is in you. The greatness of Torah is also that when you're trying to understand it, you're putting yourself in it. So you have the other direction as well. So you are enveloped in the Torah, and the Torah is, so to say, like Aviyachal, enveloped in you. But let's focus about the latter. And this correlation of eating and learning Torah will be found in our topic, even though we already learned before in Brachas. When we started to learn what's the sources, we had in the Yerushalmi 4 different sources of making a bracha pre-eating. And we're going to still learn that making birchas anehen is a midrabanan. So they are asmachtas. Same thing in our sugya. Don't think that because we just spoke about Doraisa, the Rabbanan, there's going to be certain sources. It doesn't mean that everything is Midoraisa. Actually, whether Birchas HaTorah is a Doraisa or the Rabbanan is a debate, is a machloikes. But let's just agree on one nukuda, that bracha pre and post you only find in 2 areas. You can almost say lahavda. You have to say lahavda by Torah. And again, for the limud HaTorah, you only make a bracha pre. Limud HaTorah. But for kriyas HaTorah, you make a bracha pre and post. And by eating, you make a bracha pre-eating and post-eating. That's what we're going to learn. Says the Gemara, that chasuv b'Torah bracha lefoneh. We find in the Torah, we find regarding learning Torah, that you have to make a bracha prior to learning Torah. What is the pasuk? I know the Gemara is going to say, we have another couple extra minutes. Look inside the Pnei Moshe, not on top of the big Pnei Moshe, the 3rd line from the top of the Amid. Kasuv, regarding the Torah bracha lefoneh v'chuli koloimet, l'madnu min ha-kasuv, we learn from Scripture, and you should know it can mean an asmach. I don't want you to confuse, but let's go with the pshat. Know that it's a doiraisa. Levarach ala Torah lefoneh. Where do we find it? Kedadarish mikra. We learn it from the verse pasuk in Hazir. Kishem Hashem ekra, which means kashani ba likre b'Torah. And when I'm calling in the Torah, I'm calling out in God's name. Why are you calling God's name when you're learning the Torah? The Charedim brings a Zohar. How great is that? And it says in the Zohar, the Chol HaTorah Shem Ha'isef Shel HaKadosh Baruch. Another theme that we learn a lot in Chassidus, and by the way, we're learning this in Tafshan Pei Daled. I know in the Basa Lagani Mem Daled, I know many people here who are learning up to still Chav Daled. But there's a whole big part of the Maimon is about this Zohar. But in other words, God's name isn't only God's the holy 7 names, She'enim Nochakim, and then the 10 names corresponding to the Sfiris. The whole thing is called Shem Ha'isef Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's the meaning of Kishem Hashem Ekra. When you're learning any part of the Torah, what should you do prior? Havu Goydel Lalekenu. Havu Goydel Lalekenu means bring Goydel. Bringing greatness Lalekenu means Machabrach. And then on top of that, Va'atem Ta'anu Amen. Because we also have another chazal, we learned this in the Babli, that from where do you learn that you have to answer Amen? From Kishem Hashem Ekra. When you actually say God's name, what should you do? Answer Amen. No, it's amazing how the Pnei Moshe brings them both together. Bottom line is that we do have a source for making a bracha pre. Let's just finish the Pnei Moshe. I'm invited in the Pnei Moshe. And in contrast, we see the opposite. We find explicitly the la'achra, right? The Pnei Moshe doesn't even have to quote. We just had this pasuk in the Gemara. And that we had before in the Sugi in Yerushalmi 4 different asmachtas back inside the Gemara. So ve'ein kasav v'toyde bracha lefaneh. Maxil, for now, guys, we're reading inside the Gemara, Kishem Hashem Ekra, Hava Goy Lelekain. Ksiv b'masim bracha la'achra, b'chalt v'savot v'irachta, v'enksiv l'fanav, maksiv achra, b'chalt v'savot. So now the question is, uminayin litain es ha'amur bazeh, bazeh, ves ha'amur bazeh, bazeh. How do we know that whatever was written in one place explicitly is also to be done in the other? It's almost like a given that we're learning one from the other. That which is written here also goes there. That which is written there also. How do we know that? Now listen to the many different ways of going about this. So, what we're learning right now, the Gemara, the Amoraim had a Mesoira. What we're learning now was Shitas Rabbi Akiva. And we're going to learn now a Gzeira Shava that you never heard in your life. And whether we're going to learn, we have time. Both the Charedim and the Pnei Moshe, it's mamish unique. I'll say it by heart. First of all, we don't make Gzeira Shavas from Hashem's holy name. This will be the only Gzeira Shava from Hashem, and it's not exactly Hashem, but that's going to be one big Chiddush. Another Chiddush, another way of learning the next Gemara is that when you make a Gzeira Shava and two words are the same, and we learn so many times that even if the words are not exactly the same, but if their content is the same, they can also be used for Gzeira Shava. And ain't Adam Doidish Gzeira Shava, Elam Kain Kiblim and Rabbi. You can't make up your own Gzeira Shavas, but it has to be equal. Many words in the Torah, if the vowels are placed differently, they have a complete different meaning. And when if vowels have a complete different meaning, you don't make it Gzeira Shava. Here we will. And let's begin. The first way of learning this will be, we're going to go with the Charedim. And listen to these words. What we're reading right now is the way the Charedim understands it. It says shame and it says sham. And it means complete different things. The Gzeira Shava. Let's go. Where does it say shame? What's the shame? Let's go look inside the Charedim. Little Charedim. Right? Shame, sham. Ksiva Parshas Re'ei, v'yachalta lifnei Hashem, l'shaken shemoy, sham, ma'aseh digancha. All right, so what's sham? Regarding eating. Ki shame Hashem ekra. Shame and sham. Shame Hashem ekra is for Limud HaTorah. Eating, now, v'chalta v'savata, you don't have the word sham. But another blessing regarding eating. V'achalta sham. Shame sham. So ibazoi, ma shame, shem batoyra bracha lefanov. That's the whole meaning. Ekro, havu goydel alekenu pri. So af sham, shem b'mazim bracha lefanov. And now the other way around also. Ma sham, that it says b'mazim bracha le'achrov. Af shame, shem batoyra bracha le'achrov. Now the problem is, how do you do that? So says the Charedim, let's finish the Charedim. He says, I'll gav, the last few lines. The B'Torah, shame is with that Seder. And over there in Re'ei, Ubedagan, regarding the eating of the Dagan. Over here in Yerushalmi, it says, B'Kamatz, Sham. So now he'll tell you how, how it works. So Kaimelon, Yesh Eim La Mikra, Yesh Eim La Masoidus. Yeah, you're right. Mikra means the way the words are pronounced. The Soidus is the tradition of the way it's written. Since the Torah is written without vowels, so you could do it. In this case, and I want to add to that, it doesn't mean, let's go, we paskin that Birchas HaNehenen 3 is midrabanan. I want you to know that Gzeira Shavas are doiraisis. When you have a din that's learned from the Yud Gimel Midos, it's not a derabana. It's a mina Torah. But it fits. In other words, just like you have a concept of an asmachta, it's like a Gzeira Shava asmachta. Anyway, that's one way. Now let's go inside the Pnei Moshe. And the Pnei Moshe has a whole different Gemara. He says like this. It says over here, Ki shame Hashem ekra. Shame Hashem ekra. What does it say? By Birchas HaMazon, v'achalta v'savatu v'irachta es. Now, really, when you read the Torah, you don't say the word shame. Shame. But shame means God's name. What a stretch. Shame. Uverachta es Hashem. Virachta es Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, which is the name. We don't say God's name, we say the name. Kishem, or better, Kishem Hashem Ekra means, like he quoted from the Zajac HaKadosh, that Kishem is that call the whole Torah, right, is Shemaisim Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God's name. Yes, it is a stretch. The biggest stretch of it is not because it doesn't say the word shame. It says Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's because we don't make Zayda Shabbos from God's name. You won't find this anywhere. Here it says Vayeber Hashem El Moshe. There it says Vayidaber Hashem El Moshe. So all the dinim on the Torah, you don't find that. Now, I know we don't make up Zayda Shabbos. You could say that by any Zayda Shabbos. You're not going to find Hashem's name used. And here you're not even using Mamish. Shame and Gaval. Okay, now At Kedoin Kerabakiva. And that's something the Gemara knew. And now the Gemara says, I want you to know that according to Rabbi Yishmael, it's not a Gzei Shabbos, it's a Kal V'Chayim. What's a Kal V'Chayim? Rabbi Yishmael says Kal V'Chayim. Let's go. Ma im Mazoi. She'ein ton bracha lofanav. She'ein ton means explicitly. Guys, we make brachas before. She'ein ton means that the Torah only wrote about the bracha later. Because the Torah didn't write the bracha before. Nevertheless, the Torah wrote ton bracha la'achrav. So Torah, where the Torah demands to you to make a bracha before, zicher, din, that you have to have a bracha afterwards. So now you end up knowing Torah. And now let's go backwards. And now let's build a building on a building. So Atka doing Torah. Mazin ma. Let's go back. Im Torah. She'enu tu a bracha lefanav. She'enu tu a bracha la'acharav. Even though we just learned it, but it's not explicitly tu a bracha lefanav. Not a building on a building, it's two different buildings, parallel buildings. So Mazin Shatan Bracha La'achrav is Einadin, Shatan Bracha Lefanav. Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Yishmael, and now the Gemara, let's keep on going. Other Limudim, Rabbi Yitzchak and Abnasan, they both hold like this. Rabbi Yitzchak says, I'll give you another source. And this is not about Torah, but this is about eating. So interesting, why didn't the Gemara quote this when we opened up the whole sugya of the four sources? I was like, that was Rabbi Yechon for some reason. And here we go. This is a pasuk in Shmuel. This pasuk is discussing when Shaul HaMelech, when he met Shmuel the first time, Shaul HaMelech, before he was a Melech, he was looking for his father's donkeys. He couldn't find them. And that's what the Alter Rebbe quotes in this whole letter that he writes, that where did we find that people go to a Rebbe to ask eitzes for Inyanim Gashmiyim only if the person you're going to is a Navi? From this. So he finally decided he's going to go to Shmuel to ask him, maybe Shmuel is a Navi, where are my father's donkeys? What stock should I buy? Where should I mine? This is a concept shaykh only to a Navi. And he didn't know how to find him. So he met a bunch of maidens and they told Shaul, do you know where you're going to find him? That in that village, they offered a carbon shlamim and no one was going to eat before he was going to go and give a bracha. And they wrote that kihu yivarach hazevach. And let's go with the words. And achrechein, only afterwards, will yoichru hakiroyim. Many people are invited. So you see where there's a big gathering? You want to know who Shmuel is? You'll see. No one will do anything until he'll come and make a bracha. The guy that makes the bracha, that's Shmuel. There's a big problem with this source. The problem with this source is that l'chu'ura, since it was about eating a carbon shlamim, the bracha that they made was not the shahak only b'dvarei, but there is a bracha, birchas ha-mitzvahs, that you make before eating a shlamim. And if that is the pshat, then how can you b'chlal learn birchas ha-nehenin? It's not shaykh to birchas ha-mitzvah. It's a whole different topic. Let's leave the question open. Rab Nosson says, no. Va'avadatem es Hashem elekeichem. Guys, a pasuk in Mishpatim. Uveirach es lachmecha ve'es meimecha. Mamash, this is gavaldik. Think about it. Birchas hamazon. You know, once you ate the food, it's like a physical thing. Once I ate the bread and the water, it's not bread and it's not water. It's a mush in my stomach. The fact that the Torah says that you should bless your bread and your water argues Rab Nosson, when is it still called lachma ve'meimecha? And what does it say over there? It says uveirach. It's like, wow. Okay, all guys, no one is saying that it's a doiraisa, but that's an asmach. Rebbe Yomar, we have another minute, 6:59. I'll tell you better. I don't need to have a kavul chaymer. Torah from Mazin and Mazin from Torah. I'm gonna learn one from itself. I'm gonna learn one from itself. That Oma'im b'shash ta'achal v'sava. If when you ate and now you're satisfied, tzarech levarech. That's written explicitly. So the kal v'chaymer is b'shash shu toiv lechal is like kol shein. And look inside the Rashi Ilio. The last word today, shu toiv lechal. In other words, why are you saying it's more logical to make a bracha before you eat? Because shetzarech lahakadosh baruch hu yosef. You need God more. Well, number one, that when you're eating, shalay chanik or shalay yara oines b'maychel. or that your teeth should not break. I don't know who made food for the Rasharili, or you have these imagine you're eating, you can get into a lot of things can go wrong. So if you have to make a bracha afterwards, for sure you have to make a bracha before, and indeed, you don't have to learn one from the other. Now we're going to continue tomorrow. This is very significant. The fact that he's learning mustn't from itself. Now there's going to be a kasha on Rebbe b'negei HaTorah to be continued.